Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you again, or I'll start that again. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm here today with Ellie Holly from hollyhealthcare.co.uk. Ellie is a medical herbalist and nutritional therapist, and she's been supporting me through my journey with menopause, which is what this app is all about today. So I'm going to introduce Ellie. I'm going to have a nice chat about perimenopause, menopause, and nutrition. So over to you, Ellie. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Cathy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Yeah, I've been practicing herbal medicine and nutrition for over 20 years now, and I'm really passionate about helping people on their journey back to good health. And menopause is something that comes up. Menopause and perimenopause and postmenopause is something that comes up in clinic all the time. So I'm seeing a lot of women, yeah, going through that journey. Some of them smoothly and some of them having a more troubled time. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly why I came and saw you. I've known Ellie for a fair few years. I'm very lucky to have her mum in my yoga sessions. And I think I've known your mum for over 20 years or something like that. So yeah, I kind of know the family, but I know you to be a really thoughtful, and the way your approach seems to be very person-centered. And that's what I really like. I like that attention to the individual that's in front of you. And one of the reasons I came to see you, and one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, is really to kind of see menopause as a holistic journey rather than a one thing fixes all the symptoms. I don't think that's what it's about. I've kind of got this idea that actually, personally, there are many different areas of my life that need to feed this transformation that I'm going through. And actually, I'd like to change the narrative from it being a very negative experience, which we see a lot in the press, to being something that's actually really wonderfully transformative and dealt with in a certain way. Perhaps we could, I don't know, forge ahead with our own spiritual journey and transformation, self-realization. But anyway, enough of that. I'm going to pass it over to you and just ask you, how did you get started in this kind of work?
In herbal medicine in general, I think I'd always had an interest in it. I had really bad eczema as a child, and my mum actually took me to see, I think, what must have been a naturopath. He put me on a really strict exclusion diet, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but which did help my skin. And then when I was a bit older, I remember we had a really big independent health food shop where I was growing up in Crouch End, the Hayland Centre. And I remember looking at all the herbs in the bottles and all the kind of supplements and the tinctures there, and really wanting to know what they were and how they worked, and it just fascinated me. And then I was quite sciencey anyway, and went down a kind of science A-level route, and did biomedical science, and then that just led me to a point where I had to choose between nutrition and herbal medicine for a degree. And I nearly went down the nutrition degree, but I actually chose the 4-year full-time herbal medicine degree, and I'm glad that I made that choice, because I've been able to build up and add on the nutrition afterwards anyway. And I think you wouldn't be able to gain that knowledge about herbs and plants and plant medicines without doing that kind of proper training. And then when I qualified, I just went straight into private practice. I didn't really have a career beforehand, and I think that makes it much easier to actually make something work, because you've got the time and you've got the passion and the resources to put everything into it. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about medical herbalist training. What's it involve?
So mine was a 4-year full-time degree. Mostly there's only a couple now that you can do at university. But so they're either 3 years full-time or 5 years. And it's very, very similar to a GP training. We're trained in the medical sciences in a very orthodox way. So we're trained about anatomy and physiology. We're taught about pathology, so how disease processes work in the body. We have to do orthodox drug pharmacology. because obviously a lot of the patients that we're treating are going to be on mainstream medicine. So it's really, really important that you know how those work and how they might potentially interact with herbs. We're trained in diagnosis, so physical examination, blood pressure taking, interpreting medical tests. You know, the patients are often coming to me more and more now with tests that they've either done privately or they've had done through their GP or letters from their consultants. And you need to be able to understand those. And then once you've done all of that, then you do the plants. And our materia medica, our initial plants that we cover was about 100, and you had to learn all the Latin names, all the kind of some herbs are very, very well researched. So things like St. John's wort, for instance, you know, they've been really large, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials, which is kind of gold standard of testing medical efficacy, showing that St. John's wort is as good as SSRIs, you know, the kind of Seroxat and sertraline type antidepressants are commonly prescribed. St. John's wort is just as efficacious as those medicines. But then there's other herbs that have had hardly any research on them, you know, so there's herbs that are really involved in female hormone regulating for things like PMT and endometriosis, like Chinese Angelica, and Vitex agnus castus, which have only had quite limited research done on them. And it's interesting because, you know, the herbs that are good for male prostate health, surprise, surprise, have had some really big, you know, funding and investment and clinical trials done on them, much more than the herbs that are for female health. And what's so lovely about treating female health problems is it's for me as a practitioner, it's much more interesting because it is about pairing up the right plants with that particular individual woman. Whereas if someone comes with a chest infection, it's very much like, well, I know that this is going to, you know, this is going to work for everybody, regardless of who you are. Whereas I think, you know, hormone balance is a much more delicate and personal issue.
I think that's wonderful. And that's something that I really honed in on when I first came to see you, was the time that you took to sort of ask me questions. It wasn't rushed. It was very thoughtful. It reminded me a little bit of my own work as a yoga therapist. We take time to really work with the individual and their needs. And that really came across very strongly. And I immediately like that approach because I think that's really important, because I don't think one peg fits all. You know, I think it's important to take in what's going on in people's lives. And that's what you did for me when I came to see you. It was, yeah, these are the symptoms, but there were other things going on and I needed support for example, fatigue was a great big one, and anxiety, actually, because I was fatigued and my work is very involved, you know, I'm going all over the place, and that fatigue made me anxious that I wouldn't be able to keep up my love, you know, my passion for working in yoga. So that was taken on board, which I really, really like. So let's go into perimenopause and menopause. What advice have you got, and what information do you have about that transformation for women?
So perimenopause is that kind of stage before your period stopping, and that can go on from anything for 2 to 3 years to 5 to 10 years. And some women are entering the perimenopause really young, you know, maybe at 30 or 32. I mean, it's quite common by 35 or 36. But, you know, even though a woman can be having regular periods, they're not necessarily ovulating every month. So if you're having a period, but you're not ovulating, you're not releasing an egg from your ovary, then you're not going to get the progesterone secretion in the second half of the cycle. Because when you release that follicle, that egg from the follicle that is left behind is what turns into kind of a gland, and that's what produces progesterone for the second half. And quite often what women see when they're in that perimenopausal period is they start getting PMT for the first time, or if they've got a history of PMT, it gets much worse. They might start seeing things like insomnia before their periods, low energy, perhaps a poorer immune system. anxiety, low mood, those kinds of things. And then once you come to the closer to the menopause, where perhaps your periods are becoming a little bit erratic, you know, it's so personal. Some women's periods become much, much heavier and they're getting flooding for the first time, whereas other people's will become much lighter and perhaps be pain-free for the first time. But by that point, your estrogen levels are also falling. And with that drop in estrogen, you're getting perhaps the more famous or the more spoken about menopausal symptoms of things like hot flushes, joint aches and pains, unwanted weight gain, you know, perhaps depression or headaches coming along. And the thing is it's such a waxing and waning journey, because you can be, you know, you could have 2 or 3 cycles where you're not ovulating, and then you could have an ovulatory cycle and feel much, much better. You're going to have patches where your estrogen levels are going to be higher, and then patches where they're much lower. So it's not a linear progression. It's very much an up and down route. And so you can do a lot with diet, with herbal medicines, with supplements, and with your lifestyle. I mean, I really often talk about the 5 pillars of health. So, you know, you've got diet, herbal medicines, movement, sleep, and then your mental well-being, your sense of purpose, and your stress levels. And if you can keep, you know, those 5 pillars are holding us up, you know, and holding our health up, holding how we feel together. And if you only support 1 or 2 of those pillars, you're never going to feel as good as you're never going to feel your optimum. The journey is never going to be as smooth or easy as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you there, because I think a lot of women that I work with feel that there's one solution, and I really would like to change that narrative. There isn't. It's going to be a journey. You know, you're going to have to find out what works with you. But you know, meeting people like yourself who can advise on nutrition and herbs is just well, for me, it's a winner. I think it's fantastic. For me, you offered me different herbs for different times. Every time I came to you, it was different. What does that mean? What happens in your practice? What happens when someone comes to see you? Might come to see you for the first time, and then they might come again, and it might change somewhat. So what is that? What does that mean?
There needs to be. So I've got all my tinctures behind me. So these are herbs which have been extracted in alcohol, so they're quite concentrated. So you can use relatively low doses. So things like sage leaf, and red clover flowers, and licorice root. And when a patient comes to see a medical herbalist, what we do is we pick out 4 or 5 or even 6 different herbal tinctures and mix them together into one bottle, so that as a patient, you've just got one thing to take. And it might be a couple of teaspoons a couple of times a day. And then each herbal tincture within that bottle is going to have more than one action on the body. So, you know, you're coming to me as a complex person, and you might have a variety. You know, yes, you might be going through the perimenopause or the menopause, and your estrogen levels may be very low and need supporting, but there's also quite likely to be a lot of other things going on. You know, you might need nervous system support, you might be feeling very anxious, your digestive system might not be working optimally. And we've heard so much about how gut health and microbiome really ties in with production of serotonin and stress levels and emotional response. So the idea when you see a herbalist is that they're supporting all aspects of your health through the herbal medicine that they make you, and also through the diet and lifestyle advice that they give. So just as an example, if you had a woman coming with menopausal symptoms, as your estrogen levels drop, we've got estrogen receptors all over different cells and tissues throughout the body. So you've got estrogen receptors in your bone cells, in your muscle cells, in your brain, you know, in your skin. And as your estrogen levels fall, a lot of those receptor sites are going to be left empty, because there isn't enough endogenous estrogen, internally produced estrogen, to fill them. And within plants, there are naturally occurring chemicals called phytoestrogens. And these are chemicals that look very, very similar to the estrogen that we produce naturally. They're about 1,000 times weaker, but they're still estrogenic. So by giving you plants in your herbal medicine, like red clover, like sage, like licorice, we're providing some phytoestrogens, and those chemicals will go through your digestive system, be absorbed into the bloodstream, and then they'll lock onto estrogen receptor sites, the empty ones, and they'll have a bolstering effect. So they'll help to gently raise estrogen levels that are too low. And then in addition to, perhaps giving estrogenic support through phytoestrogenic rich herbs, you might also think, oh, well, I want to put in something that is a straight relaxant, that's going to, in the short term, calm the nervous system, calm down anxiety and an overactive mind. But in the longer term, that's actually going to build resilience within the nervous system. So a herb like valerian would be perfect for that, because valerian is calming, but it actually makes you more robust and more resilient to stress when it's taken regularly over time. And then you've got herbs like the adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha, which is terribly popular at the minute, or things like Siberian ginseng or rhodiola. And these are herbs that bring the body back into balance, they normalize function. So they can do apparently contradictory things. So Siberian ginseng will help to lower high blood pressure, but it will help to elevate blood pressure that's too low. So it kind of normalizes function. And ashwagandha in particular has got an estrogenic aspect to it. And ashwagandha is gently relaxing as well as being balancing and a kind of nutritive supportive tonic. And that's why that's a herb that's often chosen to give support during the time of perimenopause and menopause. Sometimes Siberian ginseng is more appropriate because that's a bit more, if you're quite a busy person and you still need to keep going, and you're not absolutely on the floor, you might be fatigued, but you're not completely burnt out. That might be a better energizing tonic. Siberian ginseng is what was taken by the Russian athletes in the 1990s Olympics. And they did lots of research on it. It really helps with athletic performance. And athletic performance is very stressful. It's helping the body cope with that physical stress of that increased exercise. And, the chemical changes within the body during menopause are stressful. It is a time of, transition for the body's physiology. And so giving adaptogenic support then is really helpful too. And then you might be also supporting the digestion with digestive herbs, or you might be putting in anti-inflammatories if there's a musculoskeletal issue or joint pains are something that's coming up for your patient.
Oh God, I could listen to you for hours. I just love it. I absolutely love what you're doing and how you're explaining it as well. It's fascinating. I personally have just found it quite an amazing experience. It's had a profound effect on my health in terms of being positive. I have felt really good. And it's interesting, it was my birthday yesterday. And so the last couple of days, I've been bought loads of chocolates and cakes and sweets and invited out for drinks and things like that. What I found interesting is as soon as I started to work with you, Ellie, I actually lost my taste for alcohol and I lost my taste for sugary things. And I don't know if it was a psychological thing, but I was very happy about it. And so I was sleeping better. I gave up tea, PG Tips. There are other good brands out there, but I reverted to the red bush tea and my herbals, but I've always liked that kind of tea. But the change is amazing. Yesterday, the last couple of days, been taking sugar and I feel tired today. I feel the difference. And it's great, really, because it's reminded me actually what I was doing before that was better for me. At this time in my life, it's better for me. My joints don't hurt. My muscles feel strong again. I'm training again. I feel more present. My skin feels great. But I'm exploring lots of different ways of working with my particular menopause journey. So, embodying those 5 pillars definitely works. What other questions can I ask you? Let's have a look.
It's good that you.
Oh yes, go on.
It's good that you brought up sugar because sugar is so pro-inflammatory, and when you're going through that hormonal flux, when your estrogen and your progesterone is dropping, you're getting higher levels of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone as the kind of body has this kind of battle of trying to get the message through of what's now the new normal, and you don't want to add to any inflammation that's already going on. And whenever you have sugar, you are going to have a blood sugar spike, and then you're going to have an insulin spike, because insulin is going to be released to move that sugar out of the bloodstream into the cells. And insulin is a very pro-inflammatory chemical. So if you're getting muscle and joint aches and pains, when you eat sugary food, you're really driving that inappropriate inflammation higher. And the other thing is that flushing sugar out of your body involves using up quite a lot of your vitamins and minerals. So, it's quite depleting. Having sugar in your diet is depleting, but also it's pro-inflammatory. So it's going to aggravate any inflammatory conditions. And that also includes things like headaches and migraines, as well as aches and pains. And then, you've got the nervous system effects that being on a blood sugar roller coaster bring with it. Because, before the menopause, your ovaries are producing your sex hormones. But as you make that transition, your adrenal glands have to take over production of estrogen and testosterone and so on. And when you're having blood sugar highs and lows from having sugary foods or having high amounts of caffeine, then your adrenal glands get wrapped up, they get sidetracked into being involved in that whole blood sugar regulation process. And then there isn't the resources available to keep your nervous system hormones in a nice, steady, even place. And it's really going to negatively impact on energy levels and mood. And you see that so much with people getting that kind of afternoon slump, and at 4 o'clock, I have to have a cup of tea and a biscuit, or the brain fog kicks in and they're really struggling with the afternoon. And it's very much tied up with what they've been eating earlier on in the day a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling today. And I know why now, having spoken to you. I now kind of get it. I kind of knew a little bit before, but I think when you're going through such a big health change, physical change, that it's physical, mental, emotional, it's everything. Everything is changing. You need to be aware of that and take charge. You need to be a bit more serious. Back in your 20s, you can stuff yourself full of sugars and think it's all going to be okay. But it's really important when we get to this stage in our life to take these things really seriously.
Well, it's very difficult when you're given lots of chocolates for your birthday.
Yes.
It's really unhelpful. Yeah.
It actually tasted different. The only thing I did enjoy was the fudge. The fudge was super sugary, but yeah, the actual, it's kind of like the cake and the frosting on the cake, it just felt too much. And yeah, I was quite pleased about that, actually. Thank you, Ellie. I just wanted to find out what you think about the current narrative around perimenopause, menopause, about the change, and about the way HRT is delivered to women.
I think I think there's a couple of things. I think firstly, it's very negative. It's all that the menopause is terrible, and it's and aging generally, and particularly age for women and older women, and the way they're viewed in Western society is so negative. And it's interesting that when you look at societies which value older women more, like Japan, for instance, you get a much, much lower level of reporting of menopausal symptoms. So, you've got all the whole kind of physical aspect of what's going on, but then you've also got the whole way that society is behaving towards you, and the way society's, portraying women in the media and around you in the workplace and so on. So I think that's a real shame, and so that's something that we need to change. The menopause is a natural part of life. And the other thing is the whole debate around HRT versus natural menopause is so polarized, and it's almost like people have got these really strong opinions and they're really extreme about it. And we're all different, and for some people HRT is brilliant and it's perfect and it's incredibly useful, and it's something that they probably couldn't live without. But for another woman, HRT is not appropriate, and taking a natural route is going to be better for her health, but long term and in the short term. And I think there needs to be much more individualization of care and much more kind of much less judgment about what route people choose to take, and they may well chop and change on that journey. You know, it might be appropriate to take HRT for a little bit, and then you might come off it and feel that that's the right thing for you, and vice versa.
Yeah, I personally had quite a negative experience, and I'm, you know, utmost respect for anyone taking HRT. It's a choice, and I've got great respect for our GPs. But unfortunately, I was met with two GPs that one was a man and the other was a pregnant lady, and they actually looked in a book, both of them, about the HRT. They weren't sure what I should have. And both gave me different sorts of HRT. And when I actually left, I felt, I knew this is not going to work for me because of the care. And I think that's the thing. It's about a level of care and a communication between practitioners and individuals that I think helps in that recovery process as well. If you're going through really strong symptoms, I think it's really important to be felt as if you're being held and cared for. And I certainly didn't. And but it was good because it made me just sort of sit and think about, what did I want as an individual? What's my personality need? And I definitely love that sort of talking to other women, finding out what they're doing, having a really good chat and seeing it from different points of view. So important. And then finding key people like yourself, Ellie, who can support you where you need it. So, you know, I see somebody for my fitness and my strength, and, you know, that helps me feel stronger in my body. And then I do my own yoga practice, and I do my kind of yoga therapeutic practice as well, which is a lot of meditation and mindfulness. And then I'll see someone like yourself. And I also who deals with my nutrition, my herbs, and then bringing women together, you know, holding circles where we can share, or going for walks and talking. I just think that is very, very important. Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. And I think it's hard for GPs because I think they don't have the expertise. I think they're covering such a huge variety of different health problems. And, you know, you would be a lucky woman if you found a GP who was well read and up to date on what may or may not be the best course of treatment for you. I mean, what's still standardly being prescribed is non-bioidentical HRT, which does carry a breast cancer risk with it, even though there are bioidentical options out there which are available and should be the first line of prescribing. And then you're also seeing women being sort of pushed towards antidepressants when that might not be the right solution for them at all. It might be, look, you know, just because you don't need HRT, then you don't necessarily need antidepressants as an alternative. You need support in all of those other kind of 5 pillars of your life, and they just haven't got the time to have the discussion, you know, that you're talking about. And I think it's so good that you touched on strength training, because I think as women get older, you know, you've got this thing about unwanted weight gain coming and us being much more calorie sensitive. And also, you know, without HRT, there is that risk of bone loss and osteoporosis. And the number one way to offset it, over and above any medicines, is through weight-bearing exercise and strength, because you don't see these problems in traditional societies where there is no HRT and there's no drugs. When women are physically active into old age because they're clomping around, carrying buckets of water and, you know, living an outdoors life, you don't have the same osteoarthritis or osteoporosis that you have over here.
That's fascinating, isn't it? That's very telling of our lifestyle as well. And also, I think culturally, how we hold women in this sort of time in their life is actually, I feel, can be very isolating. We're not holding them, basically. We're sort of making them feel as if they're unattractive, they're old, they're has-beens, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm going to change the blah and do something about that. This is my contribution. because no, we're still alive, and we've got another chapter that could be incredible if we make it that way. Yeah, so to that. What would you like to see more of, Ellie? As in more of support for women in perimenopause, menopause, or generally just in women's health?
In women's health, it would be really good if we had more specialists, within the NHS that were actually, you should be, all of us are going to group GP practices where there might be 8 or 9 part-time working GPs. At least one of them should be a women's health specialist, where they've actually done some additional training and research into perimenopause, menopause, and also all the gynecological problems that generally come earlier on in terms of endometriosis and adenomyosis and fibroids and these kinds of things. And I also think, everything is so fast paced, isn't it? I mean, it's different now with women, in their 40s and 50s, often still raising young children, often, working full time, still at a stage where they're building their career up. And they're incredibly time poor and incredibly busy, with their families or with their jobs, and kind of everyone's sort of making a bit more space for them to have some more time for themselves, because if the carer is not cared for, they can't do the caring, and women are just picking up so much of it all of the time. And I think it's about, and often there's so much guilt around I should be doing more, I should be achieving more. And it's quite interesting because when you go back 200 years, leisure activities were seen as a sign of wealth and kind of power and esteem in the community. If you go back, what did the gentry do? They, went out horse riding for fun. They played cards for fun. You took a leisurely walk, you took a stroll. And now it's almost like if you're taking any time out to relax, that's kind of non-constructive and not achieving an aim, that's kind of got negative connotations. Whereas actually that's something that we all need to be doing more of. And it might be doing a crossword or knitting or painting a picture or whatever. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be goal orientated. And I think if we could get back to that, then actually that would really nourish women, nourish their nervous systems.
And there's going to be a lot of people who will disagree with what I'm about to say, but wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful to actually say menopause is fun? Gosh, maybe could be just dreaming there, could just be dreaming. Actually, one thing that we haven't talked about are the women who have perhaps had early menopause or a hysterectomy, for example. What help can you offer with those women?
I think if you've had a menopause very early, then it's quite usual that you would be put onto HRT as a kind of osteoporosis prevention. I mean, some women have hysterectomies in their late 40s and they're not offered any support at all. And if you have a hysterectomy where your ovaries are removed as well, you're quite often going from a place where, your menstrual cycle in terms of hormone production was relatively normal to being thrust into a very, harsh, deep menopause overnight. And I think the lack of information around what you might be likely to expect when you go through that transition is leaves women in a really vulnerable and frightened position. And there's lots that you can do with your diet, there's the herbal medicines that I spoke about earlier, but also in terms of diet, these phytoestrogens, these plant chemicals that are found within plant foods, they will support your estrogen levels because they are mildly estrogenic. And that's all of the things like all the plants from the Umbelliferae family, so things like carrots and parsley, lots of the beans and pulses and lentils, tofu, soya beans, soya products, miso soup, things like flaxseed. Ground flaxseed is one of the highest phytoestrogenic foods, and ground flaxseed is also it's an estrogen receptor regulator, so it protects against breast cancer as well. So I think making sure that you're on a phytoestrogenic rich diet, so high in plant foods. If you're not everybody can cope with beans and pulses. Some people just don't get on with them. But if you can eat them with no problems, then plenty of beans and pulses and soya products in their traditionally consumed form. So that would be tofu, tempeh, good quality soya sauce, miso soup. Not so much things like soya milk or soya proteins, which are very much a new kind of invented food, where whether or not it's good for your health, the jury's much more out on those things. So I think getting the diet right, getting the time and the space so that you can heal and adjust as you're going through the change, and then getting your supplements and your herbal medicines right. I think all of that can make a massive difference.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating. I could talk to you all day about this. It's absolutely amazing, and so much information and food for thought. Did you see what I did? Anyway, is there anything that you're doing that you'd like to promote today? Where can we find you, for example?
You can find me at my website, which is Holly Healthcare. I'm seeing patients face to face in Enfield, near Enfield Town, and also in Islington. And I'm offering Zoom appointments and video appointments, so you can see me from the comfort of your own home. And I'm more than happy to come and give talks, whether that's at workshops or coming into business places. I teach nutrition, so it's very easy for me to give talks on nutrition and herbal medicine. Yes, but thank you so much for having me, Cathy. And
It's been
happy late birthday.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling good at 56. Wow. Thank you so much. So it's hollyhealthcare.co.uk or .com?
.co.uk.
.co.uk. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from you soon. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.